What if the way you fold your laundry or like how heavily you step when you're just walking to the kitchen is actually broadcasting your deepest, darkest psychological flaws to everyone around you?
It's a slightly terrifying thought, right?
Right. I mean, we usually just write off a heavy sigh or a tense jaw as, just being stressed out or having a bad morning. We rarely stop to consider that our most mundane physical movements might be this highly visible, incredibly precise language, a language that reveals the exact state of our deepest mental habits.
Yeah, it completely shifts how we have to view our daily routines. We have to move past this idea that a stomping foot is just a random byproduct of needing another cup of coffee.
Exactly. And decoding that hidden language, that map of our frustrations, is our mission for today's deep dive. We're going to see how ancient wisdom interprets our everyday annoyances.
And it gets incredibly specific too, down to the way you arrange objects on a desk.
It really does. Now, the framework we're using today comes from an excerpt of a book written by Reverend Thalangalle Ratana Thero. And just to set the context for you, we are focusing entirely on the second trait discussed in this text, which is known as the Dosa-Carita, or the hateful and aversive temperament.
Which is such an intense name for it.
It is, and don't worry, we are going to explore the third trait in our very next deep dive. But for today, we are all about aversion. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is happening inside the brain of someone with a hateful temperament?
Well, at its core, the Dosa-Carita is a psychological state that's just completely dominated by resistance. We were talking about chronic anger, irritation, resentment, hostility.
Just a really exhausting place to be.
Oh, incredibly exhausting. But the mechanism behind it is what is truly fascinating. It's defined by a mind that reacts with intense friction whenever an experience is unpleasant. Or, even if it's just contrary to their personal expectations.
So if things don't go exactly as planned.
Right. The moment reality deviates from what this mind wants, it doesn't adapt. It just rejects.
It sounds almost like an autoimmune response of the mind.
Oh, how so?
Well, you know how a healthy immune system attacks actual threats, like viruses. But an overactive immune system misfires and starts attacking healthy, harmless tissue. It kind of feels like this temperament takes completely neutral, harmless events, like, I don't know, a slightly long red light, Yeah. or a coworker asking a mundane question, and attacks them as if they are active, lethal threats.
Yeah, that autoimmune analogy actually captures the mechanics perfectly. The mind's defense system is just hyperactive.
Right.
Instead of recognizing that a slow elevator is just a slow elevator, the mind interprets it as this intolerable offense. It pushes back against the world constantly.
Which honestly sounds like a miserable way to live. But this ancient framework is careful to point out that these aren't permanent, fixed personality traits, right?
Yes, that is a huge point. You are not biologically doomed to be an angry person forever.
Which is a relief, because if this were just some inherent, unchangeable flaw, this would be a pretty depressing deep dive.
Definitely. No, these tendencies are described as habitual mental patterns. They're conditioned by past actions, which is the concept of karma, and they've been strengthened through repeated behaviors over time, potentially over many lives, according to the text.
So it's like having a mind coated in negative Velcro.
Negative Velcro, I like that.
Yeah, like instead of letting unpleasant experiences just slide off, the mind actively catches and holds on to every single minor irritation.
Exactly. Every time you indulge in a micro-frustration, you're laying down a neurological track. You're deepening that habit. But because they are just cultivated habits, they can absolutely be weakened and dismantled. No one is permanently a Dosa-Carita.
Okay, so if the root cause is invisible mental conditioning, how does it end up completely changing the way someone physically walks across a room?
Well, tension can't remain contained indefinitely. If the mind is constantly agitated and actively resisting reality, that kinetic energy bleeds into the nervous system.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. It manifests physically. And what's fascinating here is that the text asserts this inner state can actually be recognized just by watching someone perform the most mundane daily tasks. According to the Visuddhimagga, which is this foundational ancient meditation manual, you can spot these dominant tendencies starting from the ground up.
Literally from the ground up. Let's talk about the walking, because the imagery used here is intense. A person with this dominant, aversive temperament often walks quickly, but it's not an efficient, athletic stride. It's forceful.
Yeah, the movements are jerky. Their feet might strike the ground heavily, giving the impression that they are literally digging into the earth with each step.
Wow.
And if they're walking barefoot, their footprint might appear dragged or uneven at the edges.
Wait, why the dragging, though? If they are in a rush and walking forcefully, you would think their steps would be crisp.
Well, because it's a physical reflection of the restlessness churning within. The heavy digging strike is an expression of conquering the space rather than moving harmoniously through it.
Oh, I see. So the earth isn't something to walk upon, it's an obstacle to strike.
Exactly. And that dragged footprint is the physical echo of a mind that is constantly dragging the weight of its own resentment. The movement reveals an inner state that is completely lacking in calmness.
And that rigidity extends beyond just walking, right? Their general posture is described as stiff, tight, and strained, like they never seem to just relax into their own bones.
No, they don't, because the armor is always on.
But the detail that really fascinated me was about how this temperament sleeps.
Yes, the sleeping habits. They reveal so much about the unconscious mind.
People with a predominance of this trait tend to sleep completely covered up. They'll pull the blankets over their entire body and they appear physically tense even while they are supposedly resting. Plus, if they are disturbed suddenly, they wake up completely irritated or impatient.
They just snap.
Right. Now, I do have to push back on this premise just a bit.
Go ahead.
Wait, so if I drag my feet in the morning, or I have chronic lower back pain so my posture is stiff, and I wake up cranky when my alarm startles me, this text says I have a hateful temperament.
That is the exact skepticism you should apply here. And it's why the ancient texts offer a really vital caveat. These observations are intended as general tendencies. They are indicators described in meditation manuals, not an absolute, inflexible diagnostic checklist.
Okay, so we aren't profiling people based on one heavy sigh or a bad morning.
No, definitely not. We are looking for the accumulation of the habit, the pattern. The physical rigidity is simply the natural manifestation of frequent inner agitation. If your mind is always tight, your body eventually mirrors that because your nervous system is in a constant state of low-grade fight or flight.
That makes a lot of sense.
And as for sleeping completely covered up, think about the psychology behind that. For an aversive mind, the world is perceived as a hostile place.
So the blanket is quite literally armor.
Yes.
They are shielding themselves from an environment they subconsciously view as a threat, even when they are unconscious.
Precisely. The armor never really comes off. And that brings us to how this temperament interacts with their environment while they are awake. Doing basic household chores becomes this highly specific, combative experience.
Combative is definitely the right word. When performing ordinary activities like sweeping the floor or arranging objects, a person with a Dosa-Carita tends to work very forcefully.
Right, they aren't methodical.
Not at all. Neatness and elegance are secondary. The goal is just to aggressively get it done, which leads to all these rough or abrupt movements. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like they view the present moment as an obstacle.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like treating a meal or sweeping the floor as an annoying pit stop in a race you didn't even want to enter. The present moment is just something to be violently conquered.
That is the core of aversion. That inability to inhabit the present without friction. And that constant need for friction infects absolutely everything they consume, too.
Right, the food preferences.
Yeah, the Visuddhimagga explicitly associates specific flavors with this aversive temperament. They have a preference for foods that are intensely salty, sour, bitter, or spicy.
Things with a real kick to them.
Exactly. Because if your mind is numb from the constant exhausting effort of resisting reality, subtle flavors like mild vegetables just aren't going to register. The mind needs a jarring sensory spike to feel something. The intense spice cuts through the psychological armor.
And the way they eat matches that intensity, too. They eat quickly, treating food as a necessity rather than a pleasurable experience. They pay almost no attention to subtle flavors.
Because paying attention requires mindfulness. It requires being fully present. And an aversive mind cannot tolerate being fully present. It means dropping the resistance. So they rush through the meal just like they rush through sweeping the floor.
Man. And if they are treating a broom or a plate of food with that much subconscious hostility, they obviously can't just turn that off when another human being walks into the room.
Oh, they can't.
The relational damage of this temperament has to be immense.
It is. It's the most destructive aspect of the Dosa-Carita. The transition from objects to people is where the real suffering occurs. A person with this dominant trait often appears stern, blunt, or just naturally unfriendly.
Because their mind is a highly trained threat detection system. They are constantly scanning the environment for faults. They notice flaws in other people way more readily than they notice virtues.
Because virtues don't trigger the defense mechanism. Flaws do.
Wow.
And this hypervigilance makes it nearly impossible for them to appreciate the success of others. They struggle to appreciate it and experience jealousy quite easily. Someone else's success is interpreted as a personal slight.
And when that irritation arises, it broadcasts itself outward, right? Their facial expressions harden, their tone drops, their body language closes off. They can be incredibly intimidating, even if they don't consciously mean to be.
Exactly. Now, to help identify these patterns, this framework provides a 20-point reflection guide.
Yes, and I want to pose a few of these specific questions directly to you, the listener. Just think about your own reactions for a second. Do you get tension-related headaches? Do you often replay past conflicts in your mind?
That's a big one.
Right. Or when someone criticizes you, do you get defensive instantly? Are you impatient with slow workers?
That question about replaying past conflicts is so revealing. The mind is seeking validation for its defensive posture. By replaying the argument, the mind is convincing itself that the armor is necessary.
It's a harsh mirror to look into.
It really is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author insists that this questionnaire is purely for self-reflection. Answering yes to many questions might indicate a predominance of this trait, but only an experienced meditation teacher can make a definitive determination.
So the goal isn't to label yourself and just say, well, I guess I'm hateful.
No, not at all. The goal is to understand your tendencies so you can fix them. Once you diagnose the disease of the mind, you can apply the exact corresponding medicine.
So what does this all mean in terms of a cure? If you realize your mind is having this autoimmune response, you're walking heavy, you're craving spicy food, you're bracing for conflict, how do you dismantle this exhausting mental state?
This is where the Visuddhimagga gets very specific. The recommended cure is cultivating the 4 divine abodes, or Cattaro Brahma Vihara. And the primary, most effective antidote is metta, which is loving kindness.
Loving kindness. I mean, to a modern ear, that almost sounds too soft, you know?
Yeah, like a passive platitude.
Right, but this framework treats it like a surgical tool. It directly opposes anger. The text says it's like a lamp dispelling darkness. But you can't just try to radiate love to the entire universe immediately.
No, if an aversive mind tries to do that, it will feel totally fake. The mind will rebel, and you'll just get more frustrated.
So there's a progressive sequence. And step 1 is always extending goodwill to yourself first.
Yes. May I be free from suffering. May I be peaceful and happy. Why do you think starting with yourself is non-negotiable?
Because you can't pour from an empty cup. If a person is constantly scanning the world for flaws, they're definitely scanning themselves for flaws, too. A lot of outward hostility is just projected self-loathing.
Exactly.
So if you can't drop the armor around yourself, you have no chance of dropping it for anyone else.
Spot on. Once you can generate some genuine peace for yourself, you move to the second step. A respected person, like a mentor.
That feels like an easy entry point.
It is. Then, step 3, a dear friend.
Okay, relatively natural.
But step 4 is where the real work begins. You extend it to a neutral person, someone you see at the grocery store maybe.
Which actually strikes me as incredibly difficult for a Dosa-Carita mind, because aversion breeds apathy toward anyone who doesn't directly serve your needs. To actively wish a stranger to be free from suffering forces the mind to recognize our shared human condition.
It really does. Which sets you up for step 5. The difficult person.
Oh boy.
The enemy. Someone you actively experience conflict with, you have to intentionally visualize them and wish for them to be peaceful.
That is the crucible right there. If you can authentically wish well for the person who triggers your aversion the most, the autoimmune response just collapses.
Exactly. And only after that do you reach the final step, which is extending loving kindness equally to all living beings without discrimination.
It's a rigorous rewiring, but metta is just the first of the 4 divine abodes. Let's briefly break down the other 3 supporting meditations.
Sure. The second is karun, or compassion. This is wishing beings free from suffering. It cures cruelty and indifference.
Instead of judging someone in pain, you train the heart to respond with care.
Right. Then there's mudita, appreciative joy. Rejoicing in others' success. This is the direct antidote to the jealousy and envy we talked about.
Freeing the mind from that zero-sum game.
Yes. And finally, upekkha, equanimity. Reflecting that all beings own their karma, their actions. It balances the mind against emotional reaction.
But practically speaking, if you are deeply frustrated, how do you actually sit down and do this? Your brain is going to reject it.
This raises an important question. The text is clear. You cannot force these feelings. Willpower alone fails.
So you have to de-escalate the nervous system first.
Yes. You must start by settling the mind with mindfulness of breathing. You watch the breath until the mind is pliable enough to even attempt reciting the wishes for loving kindness.
Wow, what a fascinating journey we've taken today. We started by identifying those tiny physical clues of inner tension, the heavy footsteps, the craving for spicy food, and saw how they are outward expressions of a mind in resistance. We explored the interpersonal toll and finally the systematic rewiring of that mind through loving kindness.
It perfectly illustrates how deeply interconnected our physical actions and mental habits truly are.
And remember, this was only the second trait. We will unpack the third trait in our very next deep dive.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If our external behaviors, our posture, our walking pace, how we arrange objects, are actually physical echoes of our past actions and deeply rooted mental habits, what is your current posture or your walking pace right this second? Silently programming for your future self.